Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Well, took the shot today and everything is good. I'm noticing that the side effects are starting to go down drastically. And in my mind, it has been at this point when I start noticing I'm not feeling the shot. Usually, like I said, I feel nauseous a little bit. I can't slug down water for a little bit. I feel very full. Didn't happen today. And going along with that, I put on 1 pound this week. So putting both those together might indicate to me, oh boy, maybe it is time to go up in dose. However, we're not going to go up in dose until maybe the third week of July. Because like I said, I got conferences, I got camping. I can't afford to be sick. But I also think I'm not hungry. I feel like the drug is still working. So I want to give it more time. And the reason I think that I did put on the extra pound this week is because I had birthday meal with my friend. We went out to eat. And then I had a breakfast with a coworker. And I had eggs. It was very simple. Both places, I didn't really eat anything terribly exciting. I didn't eat that much, but a lot of salt in it. In fact, it came with, it was kind of 2 scrambled eggs and some red potatoes. And so I had a couple of pieces of the red potatoes. I could taste the salt crystals. I haven't talked about this yet much, but my salt tolerance is off. I was a salt monster. If you're into Star Trek, the old generation, I was Nancy the salt monster. I could just eat salt all day long. And now, because I think of Mounjaro and how it affects your taste, I taste every granule of salt. And I could tell it was really salty and the eggs were really salty. And so I think that's what's going on. And if that's the case, I should lose a lot of weight next week and it should be fine. I usually step up my water a little bit just to make sure that I'm kind of flushing all that sodium out of my system. I do have some updates and we're going to talk about them today. And I'm hopefully going to be able to put some screenshots of this up on the screen. But the big news is last Thursday, I took a DEXA scan. And you can go, there's various places. I went to a place called DEXA. It's a national chain. It's not everywhere in the United States. And they give you an introductory price, so if you go to their website, your first visit is half off. And so I ended up getting the DEXA scan and then the counseling session afterwards, because the question in my mind is, what is my goal weight? And so we're going to talk a little bit about goal weight, and then we'll talk a little bit about the DEXA scan and what types of stats I got. I think what we'll do is, because next week I am going camping, I will do an episode about the DEXA scan and go over my stats and what it meant and the details of what you get when you get a DEXA scan. And then I'll schedule it so that it comes out next week, but I won't be here. I'm going to be camping. And like I said, I'm going to be camping with my friend who is on the compounding Mounjaro or Zepbound. So it should be interesting too. So the question is how much should you weigh? And that's always been a big question to me, because like way back when you were kids, right? You were in grade school. And obviously when you're in grade school, everyone is built like a noodle. They had a chart, height, weight. And so it was basically for women, at 5 foot, you should weigh 100 pounds. And then for every inch you are taller, you should weigh an extra 5 pounds. Now, I want to say that those charts were out of the 50s. And out of the 50s, people didn't get muscly. They didn't work out. So you didn't have this idea or even talk about different body types. The chart was so generic, but it stuck in my brain because I realized how overweight I was. And I wish I had known in grade school that chart was baloney because it haunted me. I realize now that at parts of time I was overweight, but I wasn't that overweight. At some point I was probably, 30 pounds overweight when that chart made me feel like I was 50 or 60 pounds overweight. And I wish I had known that it wasn't quite as bad, because maybe I wouldn't have felt so defeated, I guess. But I hated that chart. And so really, there's a lot of ways we can decide how we can be the right chart. So more modern charts will say, if you are 5 feet tall, I'm just giving you my example, and you have a small frame. And they measure frame a lot of times by how thick your wrists are. I have really tiny wrists. In fact, I can't even get my watch to stay up. They say that a small frame person should be between 100 and 115 pounds Medium frame, 110 to 125 pounds. And large frame, that's going to be someone who has very broad shoulders, very large bones. They're built very sturdy. They're going to be at around 120 to 135 pounds. But still, again, it's just a generic chart. And then there comes other places too, where you can talk about the hip to waist ratio. The funny thing about the hip to weight ratio is they say, though, that's a good test, because if your stomach is, let's keep in mind that butt and thigh fat is very, very stable, right? It is probably not going to be the kind of weight that will kill you. It might break your knees, you might have ankle problems. The extra weight is going to be hard on your heart, but it is a less dangerous fat. It's very, very stable, and it, particularly for women, and it's usually not the fat that's very dangerous. The visceral fat that's right over there on top of your guts, it's around in your organs. That is the dangerous fat. It's liquid fat as compared to solid fat. And the problem with it is that it's readily available. It's a good kind of fat if you're getting chased by a tiger. And so you would have like an instant access or a quicker access to the fat so that you could go chase the tiger, which you don't get from your thigh and your butt. So then they started saying, well, maybe the real problem is that you should make sure that your hip to waist ratio is at a right ratio. And that is okay, except here's what's kind of interesting about it, is that I had a really good because I had a really tiny waist while really big hips right before I started all of this. If you looked at my hip to waist ratio, it was pretty good. It wasn't so bad. And so I kept getting these, you're okay. And you're like, dude, I'm not okay. I am 110 pounds overweight. I'm not okay. But because the ratio was right, that didn't make any sense. So then the next part of it came in, which becomes a little bit more accurate, I think, is coming up with a figure of what your lean body mass is. So if your lean body mass, that's going to be your tendons, your organs, your muscle, bone marrow, anything that weighs in you, essentially that is not fat, you should be at a certain percentage range. And that range goes up based on how old you are. So just as a spoiler alert, on the DEXA scan, I got a remarkable 96 pounds of lean body mass. That is bigger than my scale. That is 6 pounds higher than my scale. And the DEXA scan is kind of the gold standard in telling you this. So basically, I am more lean than my $30 scale says I am. It's totally fine. And actually, that scale was pretty darn right in most conditions, except I was 6 pounds more lean than it said. So then what you can do is you can say something like, if you take a person my age, you look at the charts, they say that a person my age should be about 21% to 31% body fat. Okay, so now you take 96 pounds and you multiply that times 1.21. All right, so I'm going to go do that right now. I'm going to take out my phone and do the math here. So if I say 96 times 1.21, that's 116 pounds. So that's probably my lowest weight. I was using all these charts for my little placard at the beginning at 115. I decided that my goal should be 115 with no scientific evidence at all. But according to this, I would be 21% fat if I was 116 or to 131. So then if I take 96 pounds of lean mass times 1.31, then it comes to about 126. And then I started thinking, that might be a little bit better too. It changes, like I said, over the age group that you're in. I also wonder too that, particularly for women in menopause, it is harder to get lower levels of fat. And so maybe it also is taking that into consideration. Just generically, they talk about 21% to 24% as being fit, 25% to 31% as being acceptable, and over 32% body fat as being a health risk. So that is one way I came up with how much weight I should have. And so really right now I am shooting for 125, but we're going to talk about some other weights in there about maybe why that is unrealistic. And another way that you could look at your weight, are your lab tests good? Is your blood sugar good? Are your cholesterol levels good? Are you in good health generally? Can you do the kind of things that you want to do? You know, if you're a parent, are you carrying your kid around? If you want to go for runs, are you going for runs? I want to go hiking. Can I go hiking? Can you do the things that you wish to do in life? And so that could be a level where you say, I don't know the number, but I know what I want it to feel like. I want to feel like I can do all the things I need to during the day. I have the necessary energy. I'm eating right. I'm filling my body with good fuel. And I feel physically strong enough to go do what I want to do. That is another good measure of it. I joked about my other measure is me asking my best friend and my trainer, when am I done? Tell me what, I've told them, tell me when I'm done. Don't let me get overly thin. Don't let me get gaunt. Let me know exactly what it is. You know, you'll know it when you see it. And that happened with my best friend. She lost a bunch of weight before, and she's not overweight by any stretch of the imagination, but she got down to the chart weight that she was supposed to be at. And she felt uncomfortable sitting. She had no padding anywhere. Like she felt bony everywhere. And, you know, she's got muscles too. But she didn't feel good, and I don't think she looked good. And so she basically decided to put on some additional weight in order to feel better. So she knew when too much was too much. But like I said, that's with experience, right? And then the guy at the DEXA Fit gave me one other rather interesting standard about the fitness I could get with weight loss. So right now, we talked about this. I've been on this for 11 months. And so he did it. And he said that I had 2.17 pounds of visceral fat. Remember, that's the bad fat. So what happened to me as I started losing weight, I've lost a ton of weight off of my butt and thighs. Like I said, when I did this on my own without the GLP-1, I almost shrunk to nothing on top. And then nothing came off my bottom until basically there was no more fat on top of me. And then I started losing weight around the butt and the legs and everything else. This has been a different experience. I don't know if it's because of my age or if it's because the GLP-1 affects different areas. I have no idea. But essentially what's happened now is I've lost visceral fat. I've lost, according to my scale, quite a bit of visceral fat. But that is a slower fat to lose too. And now I have 17 pounds of visceral fat around my gut. He estimated with the little charts he has that at 138, I will have the appropriate level of visceral fat on me. I don't know how that knows. Obviously, it's just estimates and research and that kind of thing. But he said you might also consider 138 to be your goal weight because at that point, you won't have dangerous visceral fat on you anymore. And my BMI would still be a little bit high. So I brought this all to my trainer who has all sorts of certificates and education in this. She's really an amazing person. And she analyzed it for me and did some research into it. And she looked at it and said, I'm going to say that your goal weight should be somewhere between 126 and 138. I think that's a good range for you, you know, and to get into that particular range. That means I'm 40 pounds away from that. I'm 40 pounds away from being pretty well fit. And that's, I guess, where I was getting at when I was a kid, is there was a period of time where I remember being in the 140s and I just thought I was grossly overweight. Here's the thought now. I wasn't grossly overweight. I mean, I was overweight, but the problem was I was completely unfit. I didn't work out. I didn't do strength training. I was a blob, right? Maybe I could have thought about it differently, that if I worked out, worked with a trainer maybe, you know, I was at a university at that point, they could have helped me. You know, they could have helped me get more fit. No, I wasn't at the university. I was in school. But you know what I mean? I could have gotten some help, gotten fit, and even if I wasn't skinny, I would have been within a reasonable amount of weight. So that all has given me some food for thought. But I basically have come down to the conclusion of using what my trainer gave me, where I'm going somewhere for, like I said, 125 to 138. And we'll just see. We'll keep going and see how it goes and how I feel. I think what my plan is that I'll probably go ahead and get another DEXA scan when I think I'm done, when I think that I've hit the right number, and then that DEXA scan will give me everything I need to do. And like I said, I'll talk next week about what I get with that DEXA scan. It was very informational and then gave you a very unflattering map of your body fat, which I was like, ugh, look at that. But it helps because it really is showing me right now where I have fat still to lose. Of course, I still have fat to lose on my butt and my thighs and around my gut. But really, I have some, under my arm, but it wasn't much. I mean, I'm really starting to target those very last places in my body fat. So I think probably what I'll do is I will go back when I think I'm done and then see if all the stats, all the numbers look really good. So those are some ways that you could decide exactly what your goal weight should be. Sometimes people just decide they'll know it when they see it. When they see the right weight, they'll know it. Or when their husband sees the right weight, they'll say, yeah, you're good. Stop now. I've seen so many people on GLP-1s, talking on Reddit, talking on YouTube, and people were, their husbands or their spouses were like, oh, you've gone too far. You've gone too far. This is too much. You don't look healthy anymore, like I said to my friend. So if you have someone, around you, that may help you as well. So those are some food for thought about figuring out your goal weight. Like I said, I think now I have a good idea on my goal weight. I have it on my little placard, and I might just adjust that up and basically set it to be, like I said, it's between 40 and 50 pounds, and I probably will set it to 50 pounds and just see how that goes. So next week, I'll talk about the DEXA scan. I'll give you some charts that I got about my fat and everything else like that. It shows you basically every body part and how much muscle is on each individual body part. It's very, very interesting. They also do something that is called a VO2 max test, which is how well is your heart working? And I think that is really going to be my next health goal, is getting my heart functioning at optimal value. I need to up my cardio because cardio will help you with that. And then they do something called an RMR, and that's where they measure what is coming out of your breathing when it comes to metabolic calorie loss. Now, I always thought, you're going to laugh at me, I always thought that most of our weight is lost through poop. It is not. It is lost through breathing and oxidizing, the whole process of our system. And with their measurements, this is not kind of a baloney measurement. This is kind of a standard thing. They can tell what your metabolism is cooking at, and then they can give you a more accurate measurement of how many calories you should have a day. And so I think when I'm done with this, which could be at the end of this year, maybe just creeping into the end of next or the beginning of next year, I will get those 3 tests. One, to see if I'm at my right weight. The other, to see if my heart is in good condition. And then the third, to see what my actual calorie burn is. And then kind of assess my life. So I hope that gives you, like I said, some food for thought. There's always so many ways of looking at it. I know that I've had friends that looked at clothes size. I always want to be a size, 5, or I want to be a size 7, or I want, or I want to get into that dress, or I want to fit my wedding dress again, those kinds of things. So there's all sorts of different structures we have. The problem with charts and everything else is that we're all built differently. I'm kind of a stocky, short person, and I have known very elegant, skinny, thin people, but are tall. Or my friend, she is medium height and she's pretty muscular. So there's all sorts of different groups out there, and it's impossible for anyone to say, according to this chart, this is what you should weigh. You're going to be a different cookie in the cookie jar. So I hope that helps. Like I said, leave a comment and tell me how you're doing. Thanks so much. Have a great day.